looking at people.
And luckily I didn't have the camera on yet. Okay, we're in Judges 4. We're going to get a major judge finally. The others have been considered minor and lucky to get a few verses. She gets 2 chapters. And it's a woman. And the story is so good that in chapter 4 it's told as a story. In chapter 5 it's a poem. Same story. So it's a good story. So let's look at verses 1 through 3. And I'll start with you, Wanda.
And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Haroshon Hagaman.
Yep, whatever that.
Then
that
the
place.
people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years.
So we're back to the cycle. They had 18 years of peace. Now they got 20 years of oppression. And how patient is God? This book is all about God's patience. They keep turning their back on him, and he allows them to return again and again and again. Now, if someone does you wrong in our lives, how often do we let them come back?
Never.
And they do it again. Yeah.
Sorry.
Especially then when they
Yeah.
do it again.
That's why God is godly patient. It's not human patience. I mean, we always hear forgive and forget, and that phrase forgive and forget is not in the Bible. It does. There are verses that talk about your sin is farther, than the east is from the west, that kind of thing. But you never see the phrase forgive and forget. It is humanly impossible for us to forget. It's always going to be there. But true forgiveness, whatever the person did, that's there. It's in our history. We can't erase it, but we can. If a person comes and they're repentant, these people are repentant. They mean it at the time. God help us, and God keeps helping them.
It's even harder to forgive ourselves sometimes
It is.
than to forgive someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so now we get a new oppressor. His name is Jabin. And Jabin is probably another one of those titles rather than his name. And he's got 900 of the newfangled latest version chariots. Now, they're in a time where the Iron Age is replacing the Bronze Age. So iron is a fairly new thing. So they're chariots of iron. You can't get any better than that. And they built, if you've seen Ben-Hur and the chariot races where the guys have the mean things on the wheels, that's what they had on their chariots. And you can imagine being a soldier with that thing coming at you. And 900 of them. I didn't even think they had room for 900. Place 900 chariots could go, but he has 900. It probably means it's a coalition of Canaanite cities, not just one city that has 900 chariots, because no one city would need that. So he rules from Hazor. It's about 8.5 miles north of the Sea of Galilee. So it's very far in the north of Israel. This was the chief stronghold of the Canaanites. Back in Joshua 11, it had been completely destroyed. But the Israelites didn't do anything about building on there, so the Canaanites rebuilt it.
So they're back to all those same people they had.
All the same people, same groups of people, yeah. So again, the oppression is 20 years. The time of oppression is slowly creeping up every time, a little bit longer on the oppressions. So verse 4 and 5.
Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramon and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided.
Okay, so a woman, yay. God can use women. I mean, we all know that. He appointed men to have the accountability for the home and the authority, but he uses women. And in homes where there's not a man to take that accountability or authority, it falls to the woman. Or if a man just refuses to take the authority. But God's design is the man has the authority and the accountability, which, yay, they're responsible for us, not us for them. Isn't that nice to know? But he can still use us in our roles. And it's nothing to do with men being superior. We all know that's not true. But it's God's order.
They think so.
Yeah, they think so. But yeah, we'll let them think that. Her husband Lapidoth, we don't hear anything much about him. He's her husband. She gets all the spotlight and everything, so he's in the background. So she lives pretty much in the center of Israel. She lives in the land of Ephraim. And from there, she judges. So she's a different kind of judge than the ones we've seen before. She actually settles cases. She's closer to what we think of as a judge. She settles disputes.
Judge Judy.
Yeah. She's kind of like a governor in a way. So God is going to use her in a mighty way. He's going to change the way she judges too. So verse 6 and 7.
She summoned Barak, son of Ahinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, Hasn't the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you, go before the troops on Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the Naphatites and Jebusites? Then I will hear Sisera, commander of Jabin's forces, his chariots, and his army at the Wadi Kishon to fight against you, and I will hand him over to you.
Okay, so Deborah clearly knew God didn't want her doing this by herself. She wasn't going to be like the past judges that killed 600 Philistines, and she was going to lead others. So she calls the muscle, Barak. Now, Barak lives on the southern edge of the Sea of Galilee, so he doesn't live too far away from where these Canaanites are. So they're told to gather at Mount Tabor. Chariots cannot go up Mount Tabor. So they feel like they can go there and assemble and make their plan. And God is going to give them specific battle instructions. So the river Kishon is actually more like a ravine. During the snow melt, there was a rushing river there, but then it dried up after the rainstorms. Most of the year it was dry, and so they'd use it as a road. If you're from Southern California, the idea is the Santa Ana River, which is really funny to call a river because most of the time it has no water in it at all.
Yeah, but then it can flood.
And then you get the snow and the rains, and you get a river, but then it goes away, dries up. So same kind of thing. It's the Santa Ana River of Israel. They had a lot of those, but this is a specific one. And they have 10,000 men. That is a small army compared to what the Canaanites have. But God he'll use one person to conquer an army. He can do whatever. And the way she says, has not the Lord told you? My answer would be, no, he hasn't. But, apparently, it's a way of confirming that God had already spoken to Barak, saying, I'm going to call you to do that. So we haven't seen Jewish legends in a while, and I like Jewish legends. So according to Jewish legends, the commander of Jabin's army, Sisera, was 30 years old, and he conquered the whole world. His voice was so strong, when he called out really loud, walls would fall down. And if he faced an animal, he just yelled and the animal would die of a heart attack. If he took a bath in the river and he died beneath the surface, enough fish were caught in his beard to feed a multitude. And it required no less than 900 horses to pull his chariot. But that's Jewish legend. They're fun, but not good. Not true at all. But Sisera is a very dangerous enemy because he's got a big army and 900 chariots. So not going to be an easy battle for them. So verse 8 through 10. Well, it's not supposed to be an easy battle for them. But.
And Barak said to her, if you will go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. So she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, there will be no glory for you in the journey you are taking. For the Lord will sell Sisera. The Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. Where am I supposed to go to? I'm sorry.
Verse 10.
Okay. And Barak and Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh. He went up with 10,000 men under his command, and Deborah went up with him.
Okay, Deborah was ready to just send Barak off and say, God commanded you go fight. And he said, oh, you're coming with us. And he said, so she says, because you insisted on a woman coming with you, you are not going to get the glory for killing Sisera. A woman is going to get it. Now everyone's mind's probably going, well, that means Deborah's going to kill him. If you know the story, that's not true, but it's like, okay, she's going to be with us. She'll kill him. So Barak is mentioned in Hebrews 11, in what's called the Hall of Faith. He's actually listed in the part where Paul says, oh, I wish I had more time to tell you about these guys, including Barak. But he makes the Hall of Faith, but not Deborah. I thought that was interesting. Don't know why. He did show courage, though, because he did go out. He did go and do what God told him to do. He gathered the people, and he was ready to go fight them. And remember, he's getting ready to face this huge army with this legendary general. And Kadesh, where they're going to meet him, where they're supposed to meet them, is on a plain. Chariots are no good in the hills, but on a plain, they are unbeatable.
Almost like it's mired in mud, according to the
Yeah.
note I have.
Yeah, not yet, but at this point, you know, it would look hopeless. But Barak is still going to lead them, knowing that their only hope is God in this. Okay, verse 11 through 13.
Now Heber the Kenite had moved away from the Kenites, the son of Ohad, Moses' father-in-law, and pitched his tent beside the oak tree of Zanan, which was near Kadesh. It was reported at Syria that Barak, son of Ananon, had gone up to Mount Tabor. Sisera summoned all his 900 iron chariots and all the people who were with him from Harosheth of the nations to Wadi Kishon. And Deborah said to Barak, move on.
Oh, okay, sorry. A little too far. Okay, so remember when they first left on the Exodus and Moses asked his relatives, his wife's relatives, who were Kenites, Midianites. Kenites are Midianites. He asked one of them to please come because you know the area and everything else. So a Midianite had come with them. Well, here's a descendant. He's not an Israelite. He's a Midianite. And so at this point, he comes and he settles in Israel, but he settles a ways off. He's not one of the tribes, so he's a stranger traveling with them. So we get the information he's got a tent a ways off, and that's where we leave him for now. So back to the fight. Sisera again has a huge military advantage. He gets word that the Israelites are gathered on Mount Tabor. He knows he can't take his chariots up there, but he knows they can't stay up there forever. So he's going to take his chariots into the plain at the bottom and attack them when they come down with his 900 chariots. This is actually God luring them exactly where he wants them. It may seem like an ideal place for them, but it's going to be their downfall. So now verse 14 through 16.
And Deborah said to Barak, up, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Does not the Lord go out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak by the edge of the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. And Barak pursued the chariots and the army of
That thing.
Horesheth, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left.
This takes so much faith on Barak's part to lead his men into an impossible battle. They're going to fight him where Sisera has the biggest advantage. I've always wondered, like when you see movies about Revolutionary War and Napoleonic War where two armies are just facing each other and shooting at each other, it's like, that is the dumbest way.
Especially when they run towards each other.
Yeah, that and then you get something like the Patriot who's a guerrilla and they think he's an evil man because he's smart. But so they're going to go in and do the same kind of thing, do an impossible battle against these chariots that are going to just mow them down. But they have one huge advantage. They have God. And they win. And we're going to get more details about how they win in the poem. But notice in verse 15, who has the victory?
Yep.
It's the Lord.
The Lord.
The Lord won this battle. He used people, but he won the battle. Not just won. It says routed them. And the Hebrew word used means terrified them.
Threw them into confusion.
Yeah, threw them into confusion. In fact, chapter 5, we're going to learn more about all of this. But at this time of year, the Kishon Wadi River was all dried up. So the Sisera and his army would have been using it as a road, and here comes Sisera with his 900 chariots, and God sent a storm. So we don't know, it doesn't say whether there was a flash flood that washed the chariots away or that it just made it muck. Chariots and muck don't mix. The chariots don't move. How do you charge when you're stuck in mud? They were no longer useful, so they fled on foot. What's interesting is the Canaanite god Baal was the god of storms for the Canaanites. These superstitious guys must have really thought, oh, our God has turned against us. He sent us a storm. But no, wrong God. The only God sent the storm. So what was Deborah's part in all this? She was an encourager. We don't get where she was during this battle. Was she standing on a hill, kind of like Moses, praying over the battle? We don't know.
She was probably sort of smiling to herself, full of about all the melee that was going on down
I know
below.
it. Can you remember a time where you had you relied so desperately on God, and then you watched Him come through, and that feeling that it gave you? Nothing better than that. So yeah, she's probably standing there with that feeling.
I can almost see her with her hand folded. Like, see, I told you.
Yeah.
She was a smart when she was in the tent.
Okay, so remember God said that Sisera would be defeated by a woman. So here comes that part of the story. Another gross kind of story. So here's a chunk for you, sorry. Verse 17 through 22. But I don't think there's any horrible words. At least you don't get the horrible words.
Sisera meanwhile fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Canaanite, because there was an alliance between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the family of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to meet Sisera and told him, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." So he entered her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Please give me some water." She opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him up. "Stand in the doorway of the tent," he told her. "If someone comes by and asks you, 'Is anyone in there?' say no." But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep. Exhausted, she drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. Just then Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you're looking for." So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera with the tent peg through his temple, dead.
Isn't that nice? So first thing is, the women were responsible for setting up tents, which meant she knew how to drive a peg. She was just driving it in something different. Remember, back in verse 11, we heard about Heber and how he set up a tent in a different area. Well, this is his wife, so that's why we heard about that tent. So Sisera comes and flees and runs into her, and he has a treaty with her husband. So he's thinking, oh, I'm safe here. But he didn't have one with his wife, apparently. No one would think, women and men had separate tents, husbands and wives, and no one would think about looking for him in a woman's tent. Because a man entering a woman's tent was only for one purpose, and not if you weren't her husband, that wasn't good at all. So it's disgraceful for him to enter a woman's tent anyway. He is just not a good guy at all, because 1, he's running, 2, he's hiding in a woman's tent, 3, he goes to sleep. I mean, his army has just been defeated, and he goes to sleep.
Well, it makes you wonder if there wasn't some in that milk.
Well, and he asked for water, and she gave him milk.
Yeah.
Well, and it might have been warm milk. What do you drink when you can't sleep? Warm milk.
Not me.
She had, yeah, I know. I don't either, but it's a common thing to drink warm milk. Helps you sleep. So yeah,
And it would have had to be, because there's no refrigeration.
Yeah.
So it would have had to be.
everything's warm milk.
It was probably
Right out of the cow.
Yeah,
Or camel or whatever.
Whatever.
yeah. And so this is actually really gory. And in Hebrew, you get all the details. We don't get all the gory details. We just get that she drove a stake through his head, which is gory enough. Now, she broke a fundamental principle of hospitality. You didn't welcome people in your tent and drive pegs through their head. That wasn't hospitable at all. And tell them, take a nap. Yeah, and hospitality was central to their beliefs. I mean, they were so into hospitality, and she just blew that out of the water. Don't know if she had some kind of past with this guy, or what, but she ends up being pretty treacherous. I wouldn't want to face that woman on a dark night in an alleyway if she was mad at me. She broke her promise to Sisera. She killed a man that her husband had peace with. And the question comes up, was this God's will for her to be so treacherous, for God to use? Would God use her treachery? But you have to remember, she was not one of God's people.
Well, they had cruelly oppressed back here in Korea.
Yeah,
the
they
Israelites for 20 years.
Well, but she's not an
But she's
Israelite,
not.
and they have a treaty.
I'm thinking the Lord.
But Deborah,
Yeah.
had
Lord knew that.
but Deborah had already said
Oh, Deborah was a prophet too.
Right.
that, it was,
That
a
she would
woman
die
was
by a
going
woman.
to-
Yeah, and she does. So just the fact that she knows it, I don't know if God would condone it, but he used it, and he knew it was going to happen. And maybe he did. We don't get an answer to that question, and we don't get an answer to why.
So that was an evil deed, basically, that she did.
It was treacherous. Yes, it was evil.
So, my commentary says, perhaps the only explanation for her actions was the Lord's sovereign will to hand Sisera over to a woman. Because she was not an Israelite.
Nope, she was not. Did she see that God was going to win this battle? The Israelites going to win this battle, and she wanted to be on the winning side? Did something personal happen?
So God had something to do with it.
That's her secret.
What was it?
That why she did it.
Oh.
But we don't
How
know.
many of us want to be on the winning side?
Yeah. So we don't know why, but she killed him. So verse 23 and 24. I think that's, yeah.
So on that day God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, in the presence of the children of Israel. And the hand of the children of Israel grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan.
Okay, so winning the battle didn't win the war. They had to go on and fight, which they did. And eventually they win the war, and they destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. So now we're going to get the story again with some different details in Hebrew poetry. So this poem is regularly is attributed to Deborah. Barak's role is kind of downplayed in it, but he's still there. It's done as a song. Hebrew poetry is always done to music. It's easier to remember, something set to music. It's like other Jewish songs of deliverance and celebration, like when Miriam sang once they crossed the Red Sea, or David when he has a victory over Goliath, he's going to sing a song of victory. So Deborah is a judge, a prophetess, and a poet. She's got it all. Now, Jewish poetry, we've talked about this quite a ways back. It's not about rhyming. We think of poems as rhyming. These are what are called, the poems are parallelism, using parallelism. So line 1 of the poem and then line 2 of the poem are related. They're the same thing stated in different ways. So there's 3 parts to this poem. It has an introduction, then it has what the situation was like before the deliverance, then it has the rallying of the troops and what God thinks about the ones that didn't come help fight, and then it has the victory. All Israelite poetry starts with praise to God. So let's look at verse 1 and 2 in chapter 5.
On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang, when the leaders lead in Israel, when the people volunteer, praise the Lord.
Okay, so when it seems glum, they would gather together and sing songs to God. Whenever Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther felt threatened, he got threatened a lot, he would gather his friends together and he said, let's sing a song. Not the usual reaction of fear. We remember Paul when he was in prison, Peter when he was in prison, they sang. Not the usual thing. It takes a faith in God to sing through your troubles. Here it talks about the leadership taking lead.
Yeah.
They've had all those 18 years or 20 years of being oppressed. God expects leaders to actually lead. What a surprise. So there's the line in here, what this says could actually be translated, well, in Hebrew, it says, when locks of hair grow long in Israel. Now, remember why men grow their hair long in Israel? It's part of a vow. It's called a Nazirite vow. A Nazirite vow can be a short-term vow or a long-term vow. So it's talking about when locks of hair grow long in Israel, when you can take a vow, when you can, and you can show that you have a vow. Because, we always, I've mentioned this before, when we see pictures of Moses and Jesus and everybody, they all have long hair. No. You grew your hair long when you had a Nazirite vow. That's how people were able to tell you had a Nazirite vow. So they didn't have long hair. So growing long hair, it made you stand out, that you were under a vow. So this is talking about when you can obviously be under a vow. So these leaders are nothing if they don't have someone following them. Now it's our job to follow our leaders, as long as they are following God. But we are to follow our leaders. Well, and let me revise that. We're to follow our government even if we don't agree with everything they say, as long as they are not leading us to do something that's against God. So we don't have to follow the government when it says abortion. But we do have to follow the government when it says stop at traffic lights or other laws like that. As long as it is not leading us away from God, we are to follow our leaders because God appointed them to a purpose. So these guys appear to be united in their purpose. So verse 3 and 4. Deb, did you read last? Okay. Oh, actually it's 3 through 5. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes, to the Lord I will sing. I will make melody to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled, and the heavens dropped, and the clouds dropped water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, even Sinai before the Lord, the God of Israel. So she's taken them back in history, remembering the great things God had done through nature. He had caused earthquakes and brought storms and all sorts of, he was in control of nature. It's pretty much what this is about. It actually is a quote from Deuteronomy 33. So we see Seir and Edom mentioned here. They're the same place. So this is a picture of God leaving his heavenly realm to come assist his people. And again, it shows that God has control over every bit of creation. He can make it do things like stand still for 24 hours without everyone falling off the earth because there's no gravity. He can do it. My granddaughter's been asking me lots of questions about, well, how can this happen? And my answer is always, God. Because scientifically, no, it can't happen. But with God, it did. So let's look at verse 6 through 8.
In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jeril, the highways were abandoned, and the travelers kept to the byways. The villagers ceased in Israel. They ceased to be until I arose. I, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. When new gods were chosen, then war was in the gates. Was shield or spear to be seen among 40,000 in Israel?
Okay, so remember Shamgar of the one verse? The guy with the ox goad that killed 600 Philistines? He gets another verse. Woo! So he must have been a pretty impressive guy. Josephus says he was only a judge for about a year, but Josephus was writing centuries later. So it talks about the Canaanites confiscating all the weapons. So that may explain why Shamgar used an ox goad, because they had no weapons. But God can use whatever's in our hands. We hear here that the roads were abandoned. You didn't go on the major roads. They were too dangerous. People moved from villages into the towns for safety. It was just the wild west of Israel, all over the place. It talks about how they took the byways, which means crooked paths, which means they didn't take the main roads. They took those dried up riverbeds and goat paths and things just to stay off the main road because it was too dangerous. Their situation was so dire that they finally called out to God. It took them 20 years to call out to God, but they called out. And God called Deborah. Now, she's not being prideful here. She's just stating facts. She was willing to answer God's call. So there was this mom and dad that were watching TV, and mom said, I'm tired. It's getting late. I think I'll go to bed. So she went to the kitchen to make sandwiches for the next day, and she rinsed out the popcorn bowls, and she took meat out of the freezer. She checked make sure there was enough cereal for the next day, filled the sugar container, put the dishes in the dishwasher. She put some wet clothes into the dryer. She ironed her shirt. She sewed a loose button. She yawned and finally headed to bed. The hubby called out and said, I thought you were going to bed. And she said, I'm on my way. And she put more water in the dog's dish and put the cat outside, made sure the doors were locked. Does that sound familiar? She looked in on each one of her kids, made sure they were okay, turned off their lights. About that time, hubby turned off the TV and said, I'm going to bed. And he did.
Yeah.
Now, not being a mother is not ordinary. It's extraordinary. And Deborah is a mother too. She's doing all this and she's a mother too. And God can use you in your motherhood. So, in the meantime, back to Israel, they are becoming weak. And they are starting to worship these pagan gods. And that's where their problems get rooted, when they start worshiping the wrong God. God lets you choose your idols, but he doesn't let you choose your consequences. And they are facing consequences. And they are not equipped for war. They have no weapons. But they are going to face their enemies, even though they are way behind the 8 ball on this. Okay, verse 9.
My heart is with Israel's princes, with the willing volunteers among the people. Praise the Lord.
So she has a great heart for those leading the people, because every single one of them is brave enough to do this. And her vision is bigger than her just getting her job done. She wanted to see God's kingdom advanced. And she knew her part in it would help that. That should be our goal too, to help the kingdom of God advance in whatever way God has us working. We're not all called to do the same thing, but you're called to do something to advance God's kingdom. That should be our goal on earth. Okay, verse 10 through 12.
You who ride on white donkeys, who sit on saddle blankets, and who travel on the road, give praise. Let them tell the righteous acts of the Lord, the righteous deeds of his warriors in Israel, with the voices of the singers as the watering places.
Did you go through?
That's not,
Yeah, that didn't.
that's not a finished sentence.
10, 11?
And 12, sorry.
Oh. Then the Lord's people went down to the gates. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake. Sing a song. Arise, Barak, and take hold of your captives, son of Abednego.
Okay, so the ones who ride white donkeys, that was a status symbol, a white donkey. Rich people. They were very rare and very expensive and very sought after. So he's saying, you rich people. And who would be those that walk?
Poor people.
The poor people. So rich people and poor people, all of you. The watering places, that's where they would gather. And she's telling everyone, spread the word to everywhere. Spread the word of God's great works and how he saved his people from Sisera. It's time to be thankful. Now, remember, the last set of verses, they weren't traveling on the roads, and now it says travel. It's safe to travel and spread the word. And the people call out to Deborah and to Barak to sing and to lead away the captives, all victory things, celebration. Everyone needed to hear about how God had done this, including the common people. In the last half of verse 12, telling Barak to take his Canaanites prisoner of war and parade them in front of people is what it means. So, all about victory. This is going to be a chunk, but verse 13 through 18.
Then the survivors came down. Then the survivors came down, the people against the nobles. The Lord came down for me against the mighty. Then Ephraim, were the, oh brother, I can't even read. For Ephraim were those whose roots were Amalek. After you, Benjamin, with your people from Machir, rulers came down, and from Zebulun those who bear the recruiter's staff. And the princes of Issachar were with Deborah. And Issachar was, as Issachar, so was Barak, sent into the valley under his command among the divisions of Reuben. There were great resolves of heart. Why did you sit among the sheepfolds to hear the pipings for the flocks? The division of Reuben have great searching of hearts. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan, and why did Dan remain on ships? Asher continued at the seashore and stayed by his inlets. Zebulun is the people who jeopardized their lives to the point of death. Naphtali also on the heights of the battlefield.
Okay, so,
That was it?
Yeah.
No.
that was enough. Okay, so this is all about who helped
And who didn't help.
and who didn't help. Deborah's remembering she couldn't do this by herself. There was a bit of the nation of Israel. The remnants, the survivors, are the ones that survived the rule of Jabin. Jabin's rule was really rough, and he killed a lot of people. So she's praising the tribes who helped. We have Ephraim, West Manasseh. Machir was the oldest son of Manasseh, and his descendants settled on the west. So then you got Benjamin, Zebulun, Issachar, and Naphtali. They all helped. Now, the words for Issachar's service seems to indicate that they were Deborah's bodyguards. You'd want to keep your judge safe. But Reuben, East Manasseh, Dan, and Asher, they're all shamed in this. It seemed like Reuben kind of was interested in helping, but they thought about it, and they'd rather take care of their sheep. At first, their hearts were moved, but then they'd rather listen to their shepherds calling the sheep than the blast of a war trumpet. But at least they thought about it. The other tribes mentioned, don't even do that. Now, it mentions Gilead. Now, Gilead isn't a tribe, but it's an area. It's where Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh on the opposite side of the Jordan lived. And they were apparently very comfortable on the other side of the Jordan and didn't want to join in the battle. So this shows a voluntary act of not wanting to be in fellowship with their brothers. They were afraid that the Jordan was going to separate them and make them feel separated. Well, they didn't do anything to come join their brothers. So they're the ones doing the separating.
But the agreement was when they were allowed to stay on the other side.
That they'd come help
They
fight.
would come and help fight when needed.
Yeah. Yeah,
They turned a blind eye.
they did. It says Dan is just staying where there's ships. Their land is on the south central coast next to the Mediterranean Sea, so they have ships and they like their ships. They're going to stay on them. Dan never reaches their potential. They are eventually going to be driven out of their area on the pretty Mediterranean Sea, up to northern Israel. They're going to lose their land altogether eventually. And Asher, they just keep fishing. These 4 tribes, they put their own fears and their own wants ahead of their brothers. We don't see Judah and Simeon mentioned at all. They were the farthest away, and they might have been a little busy with Philistines. So that may be why they're not mentioned. They're not shamed, but they didn't join in the battle. So it seems like they get a free pass. And the section closes with Zebulun and Naphtali's courage. Those were the 2 major tribes in this battle. So it mentions their courage. Verse 19.
Kings came and fought. Then the kings of Canaan fought at Tukok by the waters of Megiddo, and they took no spoil of silver.
Okay, so took no spoil. That's one of the things soldiers like about battles was getting spoil, but they take none. We're getting a little more detail of the battle. They fight it near Megiddo. Now, the Canaanites gather their troops of Megiddo. It is kind of a hilly area where, chariots can just do a lot of damage. During the time of Judges, it was largely unconquered. Later, Solomon is going to build his stables there. The Syrians fought the Egyptians there in 1500 BC. Military leaders say this is one of the greatest battlegrounds on earth. According to Revelation 16, the anti-God armies are going to gather at Megiddo, gather for the last great battle at Armageddon, which is Har Megiddo, Mount of Megiddo. So they are going to gather here. We all think the Battle of Armageddon, it is not, they don't fight there, but the enemy armies gather at Megiddo. So this has been a battle place for centuries and centuries. Okay, verse 20 through 23. Let me see how much longer. It's a long poem.
From heaven the stars fought, from their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon, march on my soul with might. Then loud beat the horse's hooves with the galloping of his steeds. 23 too?
Yeah.
Curse Meroz, says the angel of the Lord. Curse the inhabitants thoroughly, because they did not come to the help of the Lord, to the help of the Lord against the mighty.
Okay, so here's where we get the actual battle. So the the Israelites are on Mount Tabor. The Canaanites are going to come attack the base of Mount Tabor, but they're like 14 miles away. So the Canaanites kind of go to the Kishon Wadi, but now, and again at this time of year, it's a dry riverbed, but then God sends rain, and a lot of it, and he floods this river. It says it becomes a torrent, and he washes chariots away. Still, others still think that maybe it just made it muck. But either way, they are defeated. Their chariots are worthless. God took care of it. Some feel that when it says from heavens the stars fought, that it means the angels fought this battle. But there were men with swords on the ground fighting it too. The angels may have been there too, but God destroyed the chariots. People had to fight against the men still. But if you were trained in fighting from a chariot and all of a sudden you don't have a chariot, you're not quite as trained. Again, it's a picture of God controlling this battle from the skies. Now, apparently the city of Meraz was no help at all. Notice it's the angel of the Lord condemning them. That's another name for Jesus. They were apparently somewhere near where this whole thing was taking place. And if anyone would want to get rid of Jabin and Sisera, it should have been them. But they didn't participate at all, so they get a cursing. It works the same way today. If God has a, well, we know God has a plan and he has a way to get the plan done. And if you come in and you are part of that plan, you are so blessed. But if you say, oh no, I'm not doing that, you don't get those blessings. I don't think we as Christians necessarily get cursing, but we sure don't get the blessing, and we miss out on so much. So we will leave it there, and then we'll finish off this poem, and we'll go into Gideon next. Okay, bye, Perla and Betty.